how they used to celebrate Ghana's independence day. They said they used to celebrate Ghana's independence day in Guyana. And so he went to Ghana to visit, and he was very, very excited. So anyway, I think they're ready to start.
Yeah, it looks like they're ready to start.
Great talking to you.
Great
we're going
seeing
to
you.
continue our conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Good evening, dear David Mies, dear Jean-Ulrich Désert, dear Arthur McFarlane, dear Na Sharp, dear Yafet Ariku, dear initiators of the Dubois Memorial Marker, among you the American Studies program of the Department for English and American Studies at Humboldt-Universität, dear Professor Lewis, dear Dr. Löbermann, dear Marula Blades, dear guests and participants. Thank you all for joining us today on this truly special occasion, and welcome everyone, particularly our guests from abroad, to Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin. It is wonderful to see many of you in person rather than on a screen. It is, however, also grand in our times that we have got eloquent in hybrid formats. Those of you joining us tonight via video stream, please also accept my warm welcome to tonight's ceremony. We have gathered today to inaugurate a memorial marker in our university halls to remember and honor a remarkable scholar. Before I proceed into the details, please let me introduce myself. My name is Christoph Schneider. I am the Vice President Research here at Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin, and I unfortunately have to replace our President, Professor Dr. Peter French, tonight, who cannot be available tonight due to health reasons, unfortunately. Well, William Edward Burkhard Dubois, he arrived at the Friedrich-Wilhelms-Universität zu Berlin, which is the predecessor of today's Humboldt-Universität, as a 24-year-old curious and ambitious exchange student in 1892. 1892, that was 2 years after Wilhelm II had dismissed Chancellor Otto von Bismarck and revoked the laws against the socialists. If you look at the group photo of the class of 1892 on the memorial marker, you can discern that W.E.B. Dubois, as an exchange student and a person of color, must have felt very unique among the white German students at that time. Dubois was welcomed by Rector Rudolf Virchow and later on worked with renowned academics such as the economist Gustav von Schmoller. Dubois' early academic achievements are excellent in their own right. However, when we take the time to imagine how he must have felt at the Imperial University at that time, when colonialism and racist thought was flourishing in Germany, the unimaginable barriers that he was up against, these achievements demand the highest respect. Decades later, in 1958, at the time of the German Democratic Republic, Dubois returned to Humboldt-Universität. By then an established American sociologist, writer, a leading intellectual and acclaimed speaker of the African-American community and the Pan-African movement, he received an honorary doctorate from Humboldt-Universität as the first scholar of color. 130 years after this first arrival at our university, we come together tonight again to honor and commemorate W.E.B. Dubois. Today, this implies that for the first time, a scholar of color and a former student is honored with a memorial marker in our main building. We honor the immense achievements of an outstanding, innovative, and creative scientist who once studied among us. At the same time, we acknowledge his untiring work against racism, colonialism, and discrimination, not only in the US, but also in the entire Western world. With this act, Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin also emphasizes its commitment to the process of globally decolonizing and diversifying academic knowledge. The Executive Board of Humboldt-Universität expresses its gratitude to you, Monsieur Dessert, the artist, who has created the impressive memorial marker and the colors of the Pan-African movement. Special thanks go to the initiators around Dr. Löbermann and the American Studies program, as well as the sponsors. I have heard that you, Professor Lewis, belong to both. Thank you indeed for your contribution. I am very glad that the memorial marker for the former exchange student and internationalist Dubois could be placed between the Student Center and the International Club, and will thus in the future inspire our students and guests. With this, I open the ceremony for the unveiling of this artwork, and I wish you all an exciting and inspiring opening event. It is my pleasure to hand over to David Mies, the outgoing cultural attaché of the United States Embassy. Please, Mr. Mies, the floor is yours. Thanks indeed.
Professor Dr. Schneider, distinguished guests, it is a joy for me as not actually outgoing, but outgone cultural attaché as of 19 hours and 9 minutes, to be here for this very special moment. Think of the remarkable sweep of history, specifically African-American history, that W.E.B. Du Bois lived through. He was born 3 years after the end of the American Civil War. He died in 1963 on the eve of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Almost a year after his death, the United States Congress finally passed the Civil Rights Act, embodying many of the reforms Du Bois had campaigned for his entire life. His legacy lives on through his work as a civil rights activist, a scholar, social scientist, historian, and educator. Du Bois fought injustice, inequality, and prejudice wherever and whenever he saw it. Through public debates, speeches, countless editorials, and essays, he reshaped the perception of African-American life and culture. This was due in no small part to his experience as a graduate student at the University of Berlin from 1892 to 1894. His 2 years in Germany granted Du Bois a world and a freedom of mind he would not have experienced otherwise. And it enabled him to see the American situation of race relations from a removed standpoint. Just as in the 19th century, the Wilhelm von Humboldt model of research and teaching became the basis for graduate education in the United States, the academic debates and intellectual traditions of Germany influenced Du Bois's thinking throughout his career. That is why we support exchange programs. W.E.B. Du Bois was one of the most prominent Americans to study abroad in the 19th century. And to this day, his experience illustrates why we celebrate immersion in another culture. It changes lives and creates lasting connections. When Du Bois returned to the United States, he became the first African American to earn a doctorate at Harvard. he reportedly said, "The honor, I assure you, was Harvard's." Yes, the honor, I assure you, was Harvard's. For 3 years, I have been aware of and supported this initiative by our partners at Humboldt-University, especially the American Studies Department. And because of you, and Dr. Dorothea Lübbermann in particular, who worked so hard on the idea of a plaque, the great civil rights activists' connection to the university will not be forgotten. And as an aside, I also wore the hat as ex officio as board member of the Checkpoint Charlie Stiftung, in which I think on 2 occasions was able to vote in favor of supporting the creation of this memorial. When Professor Günther Lenz approached the embassy about his plans to establish the W.E.B. Du Bois Distinguished Lecture Series in the late 1990s, the US Embassy supported that initiative. Many of our ambassadors have participated. In closing, it is an honor to join Humboldt-University in celebrating the deep connections between researchers, students, institutions of higher learning and research on both sides of the Atlantic, as represented by the life and legacy of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Vizepräsident Professor Schneider, dear outgoing, outgone Cultural Attaché David Mies, dear speakers and guests. It all started several summers ago when I was stopped by a group of African-American tourists who told me that they were looking for the W.E.B. Du Bois statue that was supposed to be here at this university. Regrettably, there was no such thing, and the only thing that I could show them was a framed portrait of Du Bois that we had purchased, the American Studies program had purchased at posters.com, and it hung amongst the cluttered bulletin boards of the semester. It was then that we realized that we need something more permanent to remember Du Bois, and that the lecture series and his names, which were inaugurated, as you said, David, by Günther Lenz, were not enough. We needed something more permanent. And to remember that Du Bois studied at this very institution and that he received, I mean, in this building, I think there's something special about that, and he received his honorary doctorate in this very room. So we started to think about a permanent marker, and we were very lucky to find in Jean-Éric Désert what I think was the ideal artist to bring his vision to this beautiful memorial, and we are very grateful for his dedication in that. We are also grateful for Boris Borowski, who I just saw, there he is, and his, I don't know, sorry, his wise management of the project. We are furthermore grateful that the university supported this project from the very beginning. After all, this is the first person of color and the first student who is honored in this way in this institution. I want to thank the university, its president, the technical department. Karl van Zuntum deserves a big shout out for their organizational and financial support. A big thank you goes out to the institutions who helped finance this project: die Humboldt-Gesellschaft für Wissenschaft, Kunst und Bildung, the Hutchins Center for African and African American research at Harvard University. Thank you, Henry Louis Gates. The Embassy of the United States. Thank you, David Mies, but also Martina Kohl, who can't be here today because the embassy is celebrating their 4th of July today. So thank you to Martina anyway, and also to the Checkpoint Charlie Foundation and Yannick Herre in particular. Another big thank you goes out to the many private donors whose generosity humbles us. They are from within our Department of English and American Studies. They are scholars and students in this country and abroad, and many other individuals, some of whom are joining us here today. Sorry. And I'm looking forward to touching glasses with you later. The next group of students will now hopefully find the marker, actually the artwork, that commemorates the intellectual and geographical scope of Dubois's mind. Situated next to the International Office, it invites not only visitors, but also faculty and students to reflect on the long history of Black knowledge production in a complicated transatlantic and indeed global context. If you've seen the memorial, you know that its mirroring plates communicate between the past and the present, between Dubois and the individual observer. Like while you read the inscription, you see behind you the reflection of the vending machine, like a very mundane thing. And you also see yourself, your own reflection. So framed by Dubois's watchful eyes, you reflect on your own position within a contemporary academic environment. As we see ourselves, we are seen by Dubois, who encourages us to share his dedication to empirical and historical research, his sharp analysis of the complex intertwinings of the power of capital and the power of race, his fight against racism and other forms of social injustice, and maybe he also encourages us to share his lyrical side. We are honored that so many prominent speakers have agreed to comment on Dubois at Humboldt today, both here in this room and on Zoom. So I'm looking at Zoom, which is the moment that you can't see me, but thanks for coming. And thank you, dear Jean-Éric, for making this monument possible with your artistic vision. And thank you for your willingness to share this vision. So the floor is yours now, Jean-Éric Désert.
Super. Normally I don't like to read a text, but for the sake of brevity, I'm going to do that this evening. I'd like to thank Dr. Schneider for his opening this evening. I would like to remark that while Dr. Schneider was speaking, we heard drums come from outside. And this, for me, was a beautiful moment to say that we're not alone, welcome, we're doing the right thing. So thank you, Dr. Schneider. Know that that was not a mistake. Thank you to Mr. David Mies from the Embassy for joining us this evening. Predecessor Elizabeth Corwin in Florida is following us this evening as well, one of the previous cultural attachés from the Embassy, who was very happy to hear about the project, and we've known each other for years, and I hope we get to know each other as well. I would like to thank Humboldt-University's American Studies Department for their kind invitation and patience in commissioning me to conceptualize, envision, and produce this permanent work to memorialize W.E.B. Du Bois and mark his presence here in Berlin as a student, a Berlin resident, and an invited scholar many decades later during the post-war Germany. Thank you to Dr. Martin Klepper, Dr. Eva Bösenberg, and Dr. Dorothy Löberman for their persistence and commitment to create something outside the box. And to our PhD candidates, I'd also like to say thank you, who were part of this team, Simon Rieneke and J.C. Tu, for their research and input. And thank you to the internal Humboldt-University, as well as the external voices outside of the university of public interest and their critique on this project. And finally, thank you as well to my team who were instrumental in this, such as Boris Borowski and his management skills in bringing this together, and Detlef Pusch, a graphic designer who I've known for decades at this point here in Berlin. So, a quick run through. Our exploration and journey began during the summer of 2018 with determining an available location within the main building of Humboldt-University. The first two options were 2 floors above the ground floor, located in a foyer space outside of 2 classrooms or moderately sized lecture halls. Option 1 being a large blank wall, and option 2, a smaller wall framed between the 2 classroom doors and a fire extinguisher. The third option emerged through the continued explorations of the American Studies team as a result of the public feedback offered during our first October 2018 presentation here in this Senatssaal. It was determined that a more prominent ground floor level location in the university's main building was more befitting the historical legacies of W.E.B. Du Bois. Research from my end, online evidence of W.E.B. Du Bois's legacy may be seen by the wealth of plaques and monuments erected on the several continents in his honor. There were no markers in Berlin, Germany, when we began our search. A discrete ceramic plaque was subsequently installed in the summer of 2019, that's what you see in the center, near his late 19th century residence at 130 Oranienstraße, currently part of a post-war social housing complex in Kreuzberg, the first neighborhood to rename the first neighborhood, Kreuzberg, to name a street after the Afro-German writer May Opitz Ayim, mentored by the late Black American lesbian poet Audre Lorde, who would foster a Black German awareness nearly a century later after Du Bois's tenure here. The typical Berliner Gedenktafels follow a fixed template of white ceramic glazed tiles with the blue text commemorating the notable person and their place of residence within the city limits of Berlin. Our collective goals here at Humboldt was to go beyond this conforming template in size, shape, material, placement, and most certainly in meaning. The goals. Fast forward to the final iteration, we are collectively proud to present today on the ground level of this main building. The goals of this commemorative work evolved to be A, anchor the artwork within a framework of time, specifically a historical Berlin in the mid-1890s. We found this through an exhaustive search of several archives that revealed a photograph of Berlin University and the young Dubois. B, deflect the static, iconic image of Dubois only as an elderly statement, dandy-like, of course, and amplify Dubois as an engaged Berlin University PhD student candidate. Within that framework of his Berlin years, C, capture an authenticity created by Dubois himself to contribute to his presence beyond portraiture on this marker. His evolving signature became our key focus, expressing his own idiosyncrasies of self-branding from William Edward Burckhardt to the modern W.E.B. And D, the basic summary facts to reflect the necessities to be comprehended within the complicity of the visual elements, scale, and color that carry the larger burden of meanings. There's that signature, that presence. A combination of sorry, this is what I want to say. This is the inspiration. The final configuration of the commemorative sculpture is inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois's collaboration, the exhibit of American Negroes at the Paris World Fair in 1900. At the Paris World Fair, with Daniel Murray from the Library of Congress and the lawyer Thomas Calloway, several years after his tenure here at the University of Berlin. The aim of the exhibition was to demonstrate the progress and lives of African Americans. A very dense presentation arranged as a study lounge with a methodical system of niches, reading surfaces, stacked and hinged panels of assembled books, colorful posters and charts, art, inventive patents, 500 photographs, men, women, churches, businesses, landscapes, reflecting an overview of knowledge about and by Black Americans for international visitors. A combination of analog sketches and 3D computer-generated studies where we determined the correct experimental scale for the artwork. It's on its now approved ground floor location, set within a large corridor niche on the intersection of the main building's southern wing from the main entrance lobby. The inescapable constraints of Humboldt-University and city building regulations parameters added a layer of complexity and clarity. Fire regulations, maintenance, and building traffic guidelines, for example. A diversity of materials was intrinsically embedded in the project's concept goals and in keeping with the breadth of my artistic practice, rather than the mono material of all bronze, all marble, all ceramic, often seen in such projects. The goals extended to a diversity of material, as I said, of color, surfaces, experiences, finding a balance between the radical and the modest, between the obvious and the poetic, boldness of color inspired by the colors from the Paris exhibition. The unusual use of purple, as well as gilding on some of the charts in Paris, or the future use of the red, black, green of Pan-Africanism, Black Power movement, including the Black Panthers, as subtly seen in the color traces of the triad of portraits. The red-dominated Dubois portrait, for example, by Carl van Vechten, the prolific white American portrait photographer who chronicled the Harlem Renaissance, of course, from his queer perspective, and the unattributed younger portrait of Dubois are anchored by the large, dark Berlin University class portrait where the young, splendid William Edward Burghardt Dubois may be easily located by lining up the eye level of the three portraits. The commemorative plaque is presented as a series of folded skins rather than solid, weight-laden forms. The student is intended to see themselves in the bent plates of brass and stainless steel, which are highly polished and meant to mirror the surrounding Humboldt-University environment as a space of research and scholarship that serve as part of W.E.B. Du Bois's formation as a world figure. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and thank you for your interest in this project.
Thank you so much, Jean-Ulrich. Our next speaker is David Levering-Lewis, the author of the seminal 2-volume biography of W.E.B. Du Bois and his complex life. And if you see those 2 volumes, those of you who are not Americanists, because all Americanists know this, but they're thick. For many of us, you do not need an introduction. A professor emeritus of history at New York University, David flew into Berlin yesterday to join us as part of the team, which makes us immensely happy. And we're very happy that you're here and looking forward to your words. Thank you, David.
This is an extraordinary moment in time, and listening to Jean-Ulrich Désert describe the elements, conceptual and aesthetic, that went into the reification of this medallion, this plaque, is extremely enlightening, appropriate. It seems it has been consummated wondrously well. It's been a long time, I think, since I became aware of the prospect of this event when Professor Dorothea Loberman informed me that there was a determination on the part of a critical mass here at Humboldt to make this possible. And so I did fly in yesterday, and I said, "What should I say?" And she said, "Be present and be brief." And so I shall. William Edward Burghardt Dubois, Harvard University's second African-American graduate, arrived in the historic old Thuringian town of Eisenach in early August 1892. As we've heard, he was 24, holder of a prestigious American research fellowship, and enrolled as a pensioner for 7 weeks of intense German language instruction in the home of Herr Dr. Johannes Marbach, the rector of the Wartburg Castle. Martin Luther translated the Greek New Testament into German in Eisenach's Wartburg, and the town was the birthplace of Johannes Sebastian Bach. And such local history deeply impressed Dubois, who wrote about it to his mostly white Sunday school mates in faraway Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Schloss Wartburg loomed over Eisenach. He wrote them, quote, "When your great-great-grandfather stole my great-great-grandfather and brought him as a slave to America," quotes. The letter was an early instance of historical facts linked together didactically, the signature of Duboisian discourse. And out of range of his American demons, Dubois grew lighter, almost playful, more accessible with each week in Eisenach. Blue-eyed, raven-haired Dora, one of the Marbach daughters, was happy to help him become more human. She paired herself with him on their chaperoned forays to the church and concerts, and prompted him to invite her to the town's very formal annual ball. The spell of that Eisenach evening long remained with Dubois, of a young German woman of good character who placed herself in his arms to be twirled about the floor with the serene approval of pouter pigeon mothers and bewhiskered fathers looking on. On the morning of October 17th, 1892, Dubois was almost giddy as he quick-marched with fellow Americans into the famous Room 33 to hear himself announced in German as a most ornamented young man. Rector Magnificus Rudolf Virchow officially welcomed him as a member of the philosophical faculty, handing him an embossed, folio-sized document which he now had to present to what seemed an endless array of high-collared administrators and faculty. Dubois departed the university, registered for a daunting 6 lecture courses of 20 hours a week, among them von Treitschke's Politics and Adolf Wagner's Political Economy, plus independent research for Schmöller's Economics Seminar. He fairly floated on the way to his room 2 miles away at number 130A Oranienstrasse, a neighborhood much favored by students. On February 22nd, 1893, Dubois returned to Oranienstrasse from a Schubert concert and drew up elaborate plans for his 25th birthday the next day. Probably lightheaded from wine, he confided dark fears and wild aspirations into his notebook. The stream of consciousness entry begins with a racing pen. These are my plans: to make a name in social science, to make a name in literature, and thus to raise my race. When Dubois left Germany for the United States in the summer of 1894, he boasted somewhat mystically in his confessional notebook, "I have finally proved to my entire satisfaction that my race forms but slight impediment between me and kindred souls. I am here free from most of those iron bands that bound me at home." He carried away part of Germany's intellectual culture within his very marrow. To his chagrin, however, a Berlin doctorate had eluded him because the Slater Fund refused a second extension of his fellowship, and so lacking 2 more terms as required by the university, Dubois departed without the doctorate. As we've heard, he said he consoled himself with a mere PhD from Harvard. He lamented this development in a line from Faust, "Entbehren sollt du, sollst entbehren. Thou shalt forego, shalt do without." As he sailed past the Statue of Liberty, he wrote bitterly of dropping back into negrophobic America. 40 years later, notwithstanding race prejudice, the eminent historian Henry Steele Commager's 1948 list, "Men Who Make Up Our Minds," ranked Dubois with Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. But yet, a mere 3 years later, Dubois's reputation would lie in ruins, and his freedom to work and walk among his compatriots would hang in the balance of Cold War justice. He would be but one victim among the many accused and censored, yet the humiliation visited upon him, as with his friend Paul Robeson, was meant as an express warning to his people and their leaders a message that their long struggle for equality must continue to exemplify commendable patience, conventional patriotism, and immunity to radical economic ideas. But in 1958, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, finally handed down an opinion consonant with the First Amendment. His passport restored, Dubois and Shirley Graham Dubois sailed away to red carpet receptions in Britain, the Netherlands, Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, and China. In recognition of his international pacifism and his path-setting scholarship, the former Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm University of Berlin fulfilled an old dream by bestowing the honorary degree of Doctor of Economics, the degree Dubois had, quote, coveted 65 years before to the strains of Bach in the Great Hall. He dared not rely upon his once impeccable German, instead reading in English a rather ceremonial address translated by a university officer, touching upon some of the high points of his 90 years. When the German Democratic Republic renamed the University of Berlin in honor of its founder, von Humboldt, after the Second World War, it ordered carved above the columned entrance hall Marx's aphorism: "The philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point is to change it." This evening, we unveil a fitting memorial to an adopted son of this university whose 95 years both interpreted and profoundly changed our world, as have a few others. Thank you.
Okay, now we could Arthur McFarlane, who is joining us via Zoom, is Dubois's great-grandson. He clearly has an interesting life of his own as a population health analyst, but he has also taken up the responsibility of heritage and has given many lectures on his great-grandfather and what his work means to us today. On the celebration of his 90th birthday in 1958, Dubois read out a speech addressed to his then 3-month-old great-grandson. I understand Arthur's speaking career on Dubois as a reply to this address. And I'm very happy that you're here. And I don't know, you can see the screen, so
I can hear you just fine.
You can see that. I pulled up the picture that you sent me the other day. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that I share that picture with folks when I do talks on Grandpa, just to prove I was cute once. So thank you for sharing it in this case. Thank you, Dr. Schneider, Dr. Lowerman. It's wonderful to be a part of your ceremony today. I really would be remiss if I didn't start out my remarks by saying to Jean-Eric Desert, the wonder that I have with the artistic interpretation that you've done there. I've seen so many different things that people have done around the world, and I love the work that you have put there in Humboldt-University. I really think that it's going to be something as you wanted and as the university wanted to remember Grandpa for a very long time. So thank you so much for your artistic interpretation. One of the things that I think I find most interesting about Grandpa, as David mentioned, is this sense that we really look at Grandpa through many different eyes. I think he's seen through the eyes of the time that he spent in Germany, the time that he spent at the University at Wilberforce, the time that he spent when he was at Harvard, the time that he spent when he was at Atlanta University. All of those places, all of those great learning institutions really become a part of his life. When he leaves the confines of southwestern Massachusetts to go to Fisk University, he sees this new world, this world that is made up of people like him, who look like him, who are many-hued. It is through these different experiences in many different places, many different universities, that give Grandpa all of the life and all of the energy that he uses throughout his 95 years to bring us to the point that we are here today. One of the things that I most admire about my great-grandfather is his persistence. He tried so many different things and so many different ways to get across the message that, in fact, Black people are like this. African Americans have these kinds of characteristics. They've done these kinds of things in the world. They are a part of a larger diaspora of people from Africa who have these kinds of characteristics. He was not content to let the world continue to see African Americans within the tiny frame that they had been placed by American history, by American historians, by American people. I think for me, as I look forward to the things that can happen, the things that can change in the world and in America, as well as their connections to Africa, I see that Grandpa has led that way already. I see he has already cleared that path. There are so many different pieces of the puzzle that he brought to the table many, many years ago. I talk to people constantly, and I find it amazing that they are grabbing one piece of Grandpa or one thing that he said 100 years ago. One of the things that I find most fascinating as well is how historians are beginning to look at Grandpa and see all of the things that he brought to the table. One of the ways that I feel like I can contribute to that is to constantly remind people of something that Dr. Loberman was just talking about, the advice that he gave me when I was 3 months old. So when I give talks, I not only give talks to in situations like this one, but I give talks to people who just haven't heard of him before, or to elementary school students who haven't studied him. It's not studying Grandpa that has made him somebody to admire. It is by emulating Grandpa that we can continue to bring that life forward. So when I talk to elementary school students, I think about sitting there in the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City as a 3-month-old in my mother's arms, probably not very much listening to my great-grandfather as much as looking around trying to figure out where I was and why I was here that evening. But then to grow up in the shadow of those words that he put in front of me when I was 3 months old, and to share those with elementary school students. Do something that the world needs to have done and something that you enjoy doing. Those are the two key messages that he tried to deliver to me as a child, and that I've tried to live in my life as I've gone forward. But one of the things that I find really fascinating in this time is something that Grandpa said about the passage of time. He said there was not much difference between 100 and 1,000 years. And so as we look at the changing picture of our history across time, we get the opportunity now to look back and see what kinds of changes have been wrought. Mr. Mies, in his conversation, in his remarks to you, often reflected back across something that he called the sweep of history, and how Grandpa lived across those 95 years and died the day before the March on Washington, the day before Martin Luther King stands in front of a group of thousands of African Americans and says to them, "I have a dream. The world has changed. Things have gotten better. But if we do not persist, as Grandpa persisted in bringing those messages, in changing this world into a better place, then we will slide backwards. He admonished us. If we did not have the right to vote, if we did not vote when we had those opportunities, a second slavery would be wrought upon us. That is something that we see in America today. That is something that we are experiencing as people in various different parts of this country try to curtail our ability to voice our opinion through our right to vote. We have so many things that Grandpa talked about, that he warned us about, that we must continue to do, that we must continue to work on. In closing, thank you so much to the university for this opportunity to be a part of this ceremony. Thank you again for this marker in your university about my grandfather's life. And thank you so much for bringing to light some of the things that changed his life, the ways that the university, the ways that Berlin, the ways that the people who lived there changed the way that he not only saw Black people in the United States, but saw himself. Because I truly believe it was that energy that really was the sustaining energy over time that allowed him to fight on, that allowed him to know that people didn't always see Black people through that veil, through that second sighting of them. So I really believe that the University of Berlin made an impact in his life that the rest of us are still feeling, that I know that I'm still feeling. So thank you again for this opportunity, and thank you so much for your time and listening to me.
Could you hear the applause? Good. I wasn't sure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Our next speaker is Na Ajela Awula Akua Sharp. She's Senior Program Officer at the W.E.B. Dubois Center in Accra, Ghana, which houses Dubois's personal library and is the site of his grave. I'm very happy that you can join us today, if only virtually. What connects our sides is the intellectual and political vision that brought Dubois to Berlin as a young student and to Accra as an aged scholar, where he spent the last years of his life. Na Sharp is joined by Japeth Ariuku, the executive director of the new management team that will be taking over the Dubois Center in Accra. And I don't know whether we can show them both at the same time as speakers. I don't think we can. So we'll first have Na as a speaker and then Japeth. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Dr. Lobeman, for the invitation. I'm very much excited. And thank you, Mr. Yuku, also, who will be speaking when I'm done briefly. So the previous speakers have done my job very easy. I was to speak on Du Bois's travel in the world, so especially to Berlin, Germany, and Accra, Ghana. And most of his life history has been spelled out or read by the first speakers. His great-grandson also has done all the jobs, so I'm just going to deliberate a few about his life in Ghana and also to read some few lines from one professor whose book I find interesting on Pan-Africanism. So thank you very much again for having me. I'm excited. The opportunity gave me much time to reflect on the life and works of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. I've been working at the center for 17 years, and this gave me much time to think about what to write about his travels. You know, I'm younger than he was, so it was a big task to me, but I enjoyed doing it. So after his graduation from the Harvard University in 1891, as we've all heard, he journeyed to Berlin to begin his degree, his doctoral degree in history and economics. Unfortunately, he had to leave after some 2 years, but his efforts will not go in vain, and he was recognized when the university celebrated him or honored him years on in 1958. And today here we are again celebrating him once more. His efforts will never go in vain. He was eulogized by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, our first president, as the father of Pan-Africanism. And Dubois is also credited with the right of being a theoretician for Pan-Africanism and civil rights as a means for the fight for world peace and to foster a continuous projection and study of African American culture and history, whether the Africans are of the continent or of the diaspora. The beginning of the 20th century saw the emergence of the Pan-African movement, founded by the West Indian barrister Henry Sylvester Williams. And in response to European colonization and exploitation of Africa, and to also foster African unity, Dr. Dubois attended the first Pan-African conference, which was held in England, and that attracted a global attention. He went on to organize subsequent Pan-African congresses in 1919, 1912, 1921, 1923, 1927, and also co-chaired the Consequential Congress, which was held in Manchester, in England in 1945. In his own words, he became an agent of peace after joining the Peace Information Center, which is an international peace movement. I would briefly like to read a few lines from the founder of the Nkrumah's Review, Pan-African Perspectives on African Affairs, Dr. Michael Williams, who is also one who really loves Du Bois and is a staunch Pan-Africanist. He wrote this book that I would quote a few lines from. The book is the Pan-African Perspective, the Pan-African Imperative, which says, and I quote, whilst the definition of Pan-Africanism, like the movement itself, has evolved, much of what it means today is what it meant centuries earlier, the collective movement of African people towards unity, independence, and liberation. The movement has expressed itself both in small scale to large scale endeavors, in short periods to periods of much longer duration, and from one part of the globe to another. It has also incorporated a wide spectrum of human behavior. This has included either a sole reliance on or a combination of various political, economic, religious, and cultural activities. Although never centrally coordinated, the Pan-African movement in its broadest term has been and continues to be a movement of people of African descent working together, often across ethnic and geopolitical boundaries, to unify and liberate Africa and Africans everywhere. However, today, after and in response to more than 500 years of Africa's entanglement with European insufficiency and capitalist expansion, vis-a-vis slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism, the Pan-African movement has evolved into a variant of the international socialist movement as well. In other words, the struggle to emancipate Africa and its people, those at home and abroad, has become an integral part of the universal struggle between capital and labor. And this is between the owners of the means of production and the workers of the world, whose labor power may produce the fruits upon which the owners depend on their unbridled accumulation of wealth. Nearly all of the leading advocates of Pan-Africanism during most of the 20th century and beyond have either been socialists. End of quote. And Dr. Dubois continues to be well celebrated in Africa, Asia, and Europe. And we are a witness of such today. He moved to Accra, Ghana in West Africa at the invitation of his mentee, Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, to become the first editor of a dictionary that would contain knowledgeable facts about Africans on the continent. This is a huge project which is still ongoing and is supported by the African Union. It is headquartered in Accra as well. He died peacefully in his sleep on the eve of 27th August in 1963 in his home in Cantonments, and he left behind a great legacy, and his great deeds and contributions to the world live on. He is honored at his residence in Ghana with a National Historic Monument where I work at and in Cantonment, and he and his wife, Shirley Graham Dubois, are also reinterred there. There's a street also named after him, and Mr. Ayiku will be telling us what they'll be doing next, hopefully from next year at the center. Dubois was a man who in his world journey of 95 years empathized with all oppressed and repressed people of the world. He stood against all forms of injustice. And I believe that Dr. Dubois's call for the scientific study of race should be considered by academic institutions around the world, if not America. So perhaps Humboldt-University can take that up. Nyeiwaladon, which is the Ga language in Greater Accra, where Dubois is buried. Dan Keshon, thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you. And my name is Jafet Ayiku. I'm a Ghanaian American. I live in New York, and I serve as executive director of the W.E.B. Dubois Museum Foundation, which is a new foundation that was formed in 2019, based in New York, with the sole purpose of redeveloping and rebuilding the burial place of Dr. Dubois in Ghana. I always say that the world over have pieces of Dubois's legacy. Ghana has the mortal remains of Dr. W.E. Du Bois, and somehow we don't know how to use it. And so the mission of the Museum Foundation is to rebuild this center into a befitting memorial for the legacy of Dr. Du Bois. I don't know, we just started this program last year, 2 years ago. We negotiated with the Ghana government. The president of Ghana, Nana Addo, joined us last year to sign an agreement for us to take over the administration and management of the center so we can proceed with our project to rebuild the center. People go to see the center, but they don't actually see what's behind it. The books, the precious books, some and many of them are being destroyed and may be destroyed forever. And our mission is to restore them. The gowns and the robes that represent the personified his academic achievement, they're all in state of destruction, and we are determined to restore them. Nothing much happens at the center other than people go there and then they come out and nothing else goes on. We are determined to revive lecture series to connect the new center with other institutions such as Humboldt-University to showcase what Du Bois contributed to the world. The center is being designed by Sir David Adjaye, the most famous African-American designer, Ghanaian designer, who actually designed the famous African-American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, D.C. We are hoping to unveil the new design in Accra on August 27th, which marks the 59th anniversary of his passing, in Ghana with an event this year. And then subsequently in New York City in September on the margins of the UN Assembly with some of the African leaders attending that unveiling. I'm hoping that some of you, if you can make it to New York, will attend that event as well. We are yet to come up with the date, but we're working with the African Union and others who are to come up with the date. So it's a very exciting project. I would like very much all of you to read about it. We have the website, www.webdpmf.org. If you can go there, you can see what we're trying to do, and we'll look forward to partnering with all of you. Among our board members are Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Dr. Abia Pia, whose father actually worked with W.E.B. Bois in London to organize the 1945 Pan-African Congress. So it's an exciting project that I'm leading, and I'm hoping I can talk more about it along in the months and years to come. Thank you so very much for this opportunity. I'm a late addition, but I appreciate the 5 or 3 minutes that I've been given to make this presentation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your input. I come to our next speaker, who unfortunately cannot be here, but I just want to mention that, of course, it was also important for us to, or I said before, how the marker, the memorial marker, reaches out not only geographically, in a way we just reached out geographically to Accra, Ghana, but also temporarily to the present. And our next speaker, Vivian Vaughan, would have represented the Initiative Schwarze Menschen in Deutschland, ISD, the initiative of Black people, Black persons. I'm not quite sure how they translate it in Germany. But she has a family emergency and is not able to come. So, I wish her all best. And I would continue on with our next speaker, who sort of reminds us that Dubois was a student here at the university. And he was the only student of color at that time. Even though today Humboldt has a much more diverse student body, his concept of double consciousness and his analysis of power are still relevant today. Our next speaker represents Humboldt-University's Black Student Union, the BSU, which was founded after a town hall meeting in the American Studies program in 2020. Alina Weiermüller is a graduate student in American Studies, and I'm very, very happy that she's here and wants to talk to us. Alina.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. And as Dr. Dorothea Löderbermann already said, I am an American Studies master's student. I'm also a student assistant, as well as the co-founder and current president of the Black Student Union at Hawu. In the summer of 2020, I approached my friend and fellow Hawu student H.N. Lyonga about the possibility of a space for Black students at Hawu where we could meet, organize, and support each other. It took us a few months of brainstorming and organizing, but by December of the same year, the Black Student Union at Hawu was born. The idea had first taken root during the 2020 town hall, which was organized by some students and staff from the American Studies faculty in the aftermath of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's murders. Here, for the first time since starting our studies, was a place where BIPOC students were able to air their grievances about Germany's own structural racism, including the discrimination they experienced at Humboldt. The need to talk about these issues was as apparent as was the up until then missing space and support these students were given. Subsequently, we not only decided to create this space ourselves, but also to make self-care in all of its facets one of the core tenets of our union. Since its founding, the BSU has participated in various workshops, panels, podcasts, and interviews, always with the goal to not only promote our work and highlight the ongoing structural injustices of this country and its institutions, but also to support others that are fighting the same fight. I won't lie to you. When the American Studies faculty first approached us in the relation to the Dubois Memorial, many of us were skeptical. Because while Dubois's work and presence at Hawu was undoubtedly inspirational and influential, and the work of art created by Jean-Ulrich de Serres to honor Dubois's legacy is as poignant as it's impactful, many of us were afraid that it would become yet another thing for the university to co-opt in order to promote a mere performative display of diversity. These fears aren't something unsubstantiated, but are the result of white institutions continuously promoting themselves as open and welcoming for all, while their actions reflect a very different attitude. As an organization for and by students within Humboldt-University, the BSU has had the chance to take an inside look into Hawu structures and has seen firsthand how structural racism is reproduced in many of the university structures. While decades ago, Dubois was unable to do a doctorate at Hawu because of a government that wouldn't grant him the needed residency requirements, today, Black African students fleeing the war in Ukraine are unable to continue their studies in Germany. While Ukrainian students are able to unbureaucratically enroll at Hawu, a statement given to the BSU about the status of Black African students states that because of governmental restrictions, it seems unlikely that even applying for a place would make sense for them. These restrictions state that Black African students don't have to officially register until August 31st. In the eyes of the university, this apparently means that they shouldn't even bother to apply for a place in their field of study, as their official status will be undetermined come September 1st. Never mind that having a place as a student might help them attain a more permanent resident status or even the student visa. The hypocrisy is quite literally black and white. In his seminal work, The Soul of Black Folk, Dubois states that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. Unfortunately, this seems to be applicable for the 21st century as well. At the beginning of the year, the BSU sent out a survey to collect some official data about the ways Black students experience their studies at Hawu. Preliminary results show that 62% think that racism is a problem at Hawu, while only 18% are convinced that racism isn't an issue at all at university. Over 50% of Black students have experienced direct racist encounters while on campus, and over 55% are worried that racism experienced at uni will affect their lives on a personal level. Furthermore, we discovered that the three biggest challenges that Black students face at Hawu are a lack of diversity among staff, their psychological welfare being compromised, and insufficient knowledge about racism among teaching staff. More than 83% of survey participants think that the Hawu needs to do more to address racism in its own halls. 40% of Black students even state that racism is never addressed within any of their classes. Overall, more than 50% think that teachers lack the expertise to critically engage with issues of race and racism in the classroom. Correlating to that, only 40% of Black students feel comfortable openly discussing racism with teaching staff. But the problem isn't limited to the teacher-student relationship. More than 1/3 of survey participants also do not feel adequately represented by the Fachschaftsinitiativen, and more than half do not feel like they are part of any community when they are at university. For the BSU, these results weren't particularly surprising, as many of us had had similar experiences. However, this doesn't mean that we do not want to change these structures. The university can and must do better to support all of its students. Some of the most repeated demands by survey participants include, firstly, regular and mandated anti-racist training for the university teaching staff. Secondly, mandated anti-racist classes for all Hawu students, regardless of their field of study. And thirdly, a more diverse teaching staff. Supporting all students not only includes empowering minority groups, but also educating the majority on their own prejudices and oversights. All of us have been socialized in a society that is permeated with racism and other prejudices. So we all must learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and face these unconscious biases to create a space where Black students are striving because and not despite their environment. In conclusion, if the university truly wants to do justice to W.E.B. Du Bois's legacy, it must go beyond gestures of representation and work towards creating a space where the color line becomes obsolete and diversity is not only welcomed but fostered into a community that is aware of its differences but united in its goal to use these differences to create a more just society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alina. You know, you also have the support of some of us, or many of us, and we hope we can support you more in your work, which we find very important, obviously. The last part of tonight's program is a performance by Marula Blades. But before her performance starts, I want to invite everybody to come downstairs with us to the Dubois Memorial Marker. I mean, I know some of you have seen it already, but some of you may not. There will be no literal unveiling. We've been cheating you all along. There is no unveiling at all because it's already unveiled. And it made no sense to reveil it, although the veil, of course, is a great metaphor if we talk about Du Bois, but we sort of left that aside. So no unveiling, but we can all have a look at it. I would ask you to come back sort of quickly. Don't get lost down there. We will have Marula's performance. She can use that time to sort of install herself. And we will have a reception afterwards. So don't tardy too much down there, but please go ahead and have a look and see you back in 10 minutes, say. Thank you.
don't want to keep anyone else from seeing yourself.
It's a wonderful, wonderful. No. But, okay. What did you say? Not just queer, but in fact, what we know really lit a fire for a kind of awakening of Afro-Germans and Black Germans. And this is also, I think, a very special Black American
Dubois.
Okay, this is the last part of our program, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce Marula Blades, who, with her musical partner, Jörg Heinrich, has been creating poetry, soundscapes, and video for many years. She performs in festivals and schools, has published volumes of poetry, and has paid homage to Dubois on the occasion of his 150th birthday at the Babylon Theater in Berlin. I'm not sure whether you would agree with me, Marula, but to me, your multi-century explorations of Black history, and I know you also explore other things, but in terms of Black history, they seem to be in a certain kind of sync with what Dubois does in Souls of Black Folk. So I'm very much looking forward to your performance, and everybody, you're all very much invited to join us for drinks afterwards outside. And I was supposed to say something about an event happening downstairs at 9 p.m., some oral poetry performance. I'm sort of looking for Herr Nietzsche, but I think he's not here, because he told me to sort of alert you to that. Yeah, but first, Marula Blades.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. I won't be speaking about W.E.B. Du Bois, simply because I'm not very good at it, but I do have some quotes which will hopefully make a thread with my poetry, and I hope you enjoy it. And thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. So my first poem is called Freedom Come, and I wrote it in 2007 in celebration of the 200th anniversary of the abolition of slavery. It is also a tribute to those who fought for civil rights. Freedom come. Freedom, an old two-syllable word. The first syllable light as a whisper. The second heavy as a leg iron. A 7-letter word, a holy number. It stretches over lands and waters, moaning its solemn songs of hope. Hope to be heard by the mouths of the others, the so-called good-for-nothings, whose bodies have been traded, stripped and maimed, and killed on trumped-up charges. Hunted by bloodhounds led by the KKK, lynched and sexually exploited. Branded someone else's property, left to rot in indifferent land, driving plows to gunshots, whip cracks, and heart-wrenching cries of, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a man. I am a woman. Freedom come. Freedom, freedom, free. The African forced to adopt strange names without ancestral pulses, polluted hand-me-downs. No roots or seeds can be traced in these pale names. An X would have been a blessing in disguise. Nothing before or after the letter, an upright consonant with room to build sense on, a cornerstone inspiring great designs. Can there be dignity in a blood-drenched land where teardrops watered crops? The mouths of whiteness, fat, honey smiling at tables, stuffed full with a black man's pain, dripping poison to the next generation. Oh, freedom come! Black hands raw, family trees felled, bread scarce, and mother's milk robbed. To save plump pink babies dressed in lace, freedom, where are you? Souls yearn for your light breath to pass through. Black bodies kneel caked in clay, scarred by your side. Repression thumps its red tin drum. Wolves howl for more blood and ashes. Oh, freedom come, soothe the deepest of wounds. Create a sphere where my talents shine. In philosophy, science, the arts and folklore. Let memory aid to straighten the back. When accomplishments rise to take flight, 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 to take flight. Don't leave me behind. Don't leave me behind the bloodhounds to be lynched, to be branded. Don't leave me behind without a mother, a father, sisters, brothers, no children and no love. Please release me. Freedom, release me. Don't leave me behind. Don't leave me behind. Don't leave me behind. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mocked. Can tears feel like sleet? It is winter, roof spot with the fall. This is the end of a hazardous passage, marked with resolves, regret, and stiff poverty. Mocked again I am. Only this orange remains, a segment to squeeze. Close the eyes to feel the scent. The warmth of scenery stretches the mind in sun. But my window's glare is frosted. Mocked again I am. Vitality and richness of earth sets lifelines in a senior palm. What is left except to keep on wishing, while pools run dry and trees stand dejected naked. Leaves flee, their green sipped out by wanton death. Mocked again I am. This brown in dryness, once lush dazzled light. Cold, the wretched cold of age walks, its tread pounds. It is not a kindred spirit to hearts filled with blood of the living. It has no shell to house the frail. Mocked again I am. Frailty gives without knowing the cost of breakage. Cracks are left visible to choleric eyes. Mocked again. green and light of things. I try to reflect on the green and light of things, worn out by the black and white of tabloids. Columns heaped on columns, a keystone cracks. Bliss is a name illumination, only the blind can see. Worn out by the black and white of tabloids, lawmakers wake with barbed threats. Bliss is a name illumination, only the blind can see. Decency takes a back seat on a decrepit bus. Lawmakers wake with barbed threats, and far across the ocean fiddlers' fists are high. Decency takes a back seat on a decrepit bus. Slogans summon the worn-torn march of footmen. And far across the ocean fiddlers' fists are high. The colour of virginity is demon dark and fetid. Slogans summon the worn-torn march of footmen. Once lit, the fused sparks revives ghosts from the past. The colour of virginity is demon dark and fetid, flag-waving men with wicked eyes do their will. Once lit, the fused sparks revives ghosts from the past. Yet again, the camera's lens is pierced by cruelty. Flag-waving men with wicked eyes do their will, columns heaped on columns, a keystone cracks. Yet again, the camera's lens is pierced by cruelty. I try to reflect on the green and light of things, the green and light of things, the green and the light of things. Thank you. The journey. In search of green and water, skidding the cusp of yearning, the yearning resembles a trapped mole, imprisoned in daylight, waiting for the moon to throw clouds near stars to grip fully the incoming night. In the still, shadows move on a track of woodland sounds. The burrowing has begun, the raking of turf. Catacombs lay before doubt, paths where the vapor of freedom filters through the dank, dark earth. Senses scurry to lock in pinhead focus. Sweat makes the tread scramble faster. Thin is the hour of time, dissolving like a remedy to cure.
Measure of time.
The journey.
The measure of time.
The journey, the journey.
The measure of time. The measure of time.
The heart steady, an engine intent on moving forward in the crawl space, where the essence of light is only a blunted memory. Time is measured solely by the length and the energy needed to outrun the snapback pull of the looming past. Shadows, arrested like insects on sticky walls, try to flee the nest where they bred. A ruin now stands. A ruin now stands.
The measure of time.
The journey, the journey.
The measure of time.
The journey.
The measure of time. The measure of time.
The roof, taken for a new home, to house familiar songs that were once yoked to the power of the dark. The hope for a goal to extend like a womb, sighing to welcome life and all its complexities. A birth during the journey, stillness within a new cry. Stillness within a new cry. gold to extend like a womb. A birth sighing, 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 bringing peace, peace, bringing peace, peace. Stillness within a new cry. Stillness, 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 and then peace. Thank you very much. A dark awakening. When the ribcage feels cracked, pressing on the red breast of the heart, a shallow pulse lifts, skips a beat and then declines, raising a puckered flag of surrender. The time has come to lure a deep unsounding breath, hold it until the hurt stops, to survey the fray in the sphere where memory ignites, splintering the once full spent hours of the night. It is in this quietness of space that all doors fling open, the mind soothes with familiar long-lived tunes that were once the sole unmistakable chance of a keen touch and the softness of gazes. Eyes closed on cue as skin on skin warmed. The mid-December dusk slackens on movements, throwing a darkening veil for pools of falling tears to hide from view a lost face that floats. The harsh clang of a clock drowns whispers of longing. Hurt sprawls face down, deflated, accepting the initiation cut in solitude. In solitude. In solitude. Thank you very much. Officially, that was my last poem, but if you wish, I could read one more. Thank you very much. It's an honor. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Being. I use it daily, the Isle of Colour, which changes tones. As I walk, moods swing like an empty washing line in the throes of autumn, trying to give form and sense to thoughts that bray. Now, I stand half awake, a brick wall buckles, rubs itself on my skin. Brown motes fall as if dust to my feet. Imprints are left behind. The body is bloodshot, but the sex remains the same, dormant. I equate myself with the air's current and the nothingness of space, and then paint my body moss gold. Under this colour, I am still me, yet different in the plague of gazes following my every step. One can be forgiven in thinking some mortals are nothing but spectres who want to cast down anyone that is other. I will write my story afresh on a palimpsest for naysayers to read. The corridor is pearlescent in view of a new horizon. I am reborn to kiss and gather cells of color, to brush them all over. How proud I am to see my brown body gleaming in natural light, distant from menacing eyes and the slurs of stinging tongues. I use it daily, the eye of color, and paint my body moss gold. I will write my story afresh on a palimpsest. I am reborn to kiss and gather cells of color. How proud I am to see my brown body gleaming. How proud I am at just being, just being me, being me.
And you know, there's wine, there's water, there's juice, there are some grapes, there are some pretzels out there. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.